by very nature of being born, you deserve to have food, water,
Yes.
shelter, rest, right?
Yes.
And if you don't have those things or haven't had access to those things, it's not because you don't deserve it. It's not because you're not worthy of it. And it's not because it is some privilege that other people are more worthy of than you. It is
Yep.
because, well, of course, there's systems in place to keep those things out of reality. And also, it is our responsibility to consistently wake up every single day and say, I am choosing to look for this.
Too often, Black women are a mere afterthought in conversations around wellness, but not in this space. On this podcast, the dialogue is always centered around women like you. Welcome to the podcast, but more importantly, welcome to the tribe. Be well, sis. I am so excited. I'm trying to contain myself and not just be a complete fangirl and revert to my teenage self because I have the EbonyJanice, the author of All the Black Girls Are Activists, on the pod with us. Miss EbonyJanice, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. My heart is just so full. So I like to ask everyone, how are they PMS? So P is physically, M is mentally, S is spiritually, and you can go as deep or as not as you want to.
Okay, I like that. Physically, I'm well. I just ate a delicious meal.
Ooh.
Um,
What'd you have? I'm
mentally,
nosy.
oh, okay. I made a salmon wrap, a salmon Caesar salad wrap.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It was good with
Mm.
I'm about to lie about what kind of wrap I have, but it was green. What is it? Is it
Oh, like the
avocado?
spinach ones?
It's a spinach wrap. Yeah. I'm
Okay.
looking up.
Okay.
It's a spinach wrap. Yeah. It was good. And I made it from scratch because I'm
Okay.
a chef. I am not,
Period.
but I did make it. I'm mentally well. I'm just, this is the last thing of the day. I'm
Yes.
coming down. My nephew has a football game tonight. I'm
Oh,
going to act like an annoying auntie. And yeah, I'm mentally well. Spiritually, I think I'm soaring too.
good.
It has been a hell of a week. It really has been. And so I could be having like these high moments right now because I'm really kind of winding down to the end of all the things that's been going on.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
spiritually, I feel good. I had some good meditation and prayer time earlier today. And I'm gonna take a nap when we get done talking. So,
I
we
love
can get
that. I'm
yeah.
gonna try to too, because my goodness, like my nervous system is like, girl, just we need
Just
to
lay
rest, we need
it
to
down.
reset real quick.
Let me tell you something. I mean this with all my heart. There are times in my day where I feel just like a little overwhelmed or my nervous
Mhm.
system is nervous systeming. And I just feel like, I'm gonna just go take a nap. I
Yep.
don't even really care what's going on. If I gotta cancel, reschedule, put something back because I'm about to go lay down. My
Yep.
oldest sister said that she thinks that I take 2 naps a day. And she's not really wrong about that because I wake up really, really early. I'll
Mhm.
be out the bed, like up to stuff by like 5:30. So
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
I'd be well, it's my grandmother's fault. She's like, make us wake up really, really early. So
Hmm.
I'm still a really early riser, but I also be in the bed by like 9:20, asleep. But I take a mid-morning nap. Like I'll lay down for a while just to kind of
Hmm.
recover from the fact that I've been woke for like
Right.
5
You
hours
already
already.
had a day. Hmm.
Yeah, y'all have not woken
Hmm.
up yet, and I
Hmm.
have done a lot of
You've done
things.
all the things, right?
All the things. And then around about 2:30, I'll be like, "It's nap time again, ain't it?" So,
Hmm.
I will go lay down again if necessary. Yeah, when in doubt,
As you should.
just go lay back down.
My motto is there's nothing that a shower and a nap can't fix. Like sometimes it's like, let me just go shower real quick, like let the water run through me and like think things through, wash away the mess and start again.
Bathe your body, get you something good to eat, and
Hmm.
lay down. You a baby. That's what you do with a baby.
Truly,
You a
truly.
baby. Feed yourself, clean yourself,
That part.
sleep yourself.
That part, yes. So I read your book. Was it in the spring? I think it was in the spring. So I listened to this in the car and I remember the one specific part that I was pulling up to campus. I was parking, but I had to like stop and like really gather myself. And it was on the chapter on ancestry
Mhm,
and in pursuit of our ancestors.
mhm,
So because of that specific part, I'm like, no, I need the book. I need the
uh-huh.
physical text. Cause I'm like, this is like, for me, it's like becomes sacred text. And
Ah,
let me rewind. The
okay.
reason that this was so intriguing to me is because I struggled with the thought of me being an activist or not being an activist, especially in 2020. I
Mhm,
felt like, oh, I'm not on the streets, I'm not on the front lines, but this is really important to me,
mhm.
but I'm not there yet. So, with that being said, what inspired all the Black girls are activists?
Well, 2 things. One, the title "All the Black Girls Are Activists" is literally it's literal for me. That's the kind of
Mm-hmm.
poet I am. If I say the sky is blue, it's not a metaphor for something, it was blue.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I say all the Black girls are activists, I mean all the Black girls are activists just by existing. I'm ultimately saying if the Black girls don't do nothing else but show up as our actual selves, that is our radical resistance, that is activism, that is transformative, that is essential.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one place that I was kind of thinking through at the time. But I've told this story maybe once before publicly about the fact that originally All the Black Girls Are Active was gonna be a romance novel. Have I ever
Oh,
told the story before?
oh.
Yeah, originally All the Black Girls Are Activists was gonna be a romance novel. 2020, I was long distance at the time with, my partner at the time.
Mm-hmm.
We met in Harlem a few years before that, but I had moved to New Orleans in the midst of the pandemic, so we're
Mm-hmm.
long distance. And one day we were about to have FaceTime date,
Mm-hmm.
and what's the young baby's name from this young girl, teenage girl was murdered by the police in Ohio. And so here's two Black people who love each other, who are planning to, get on FaceTime and, laugh and grin and giggle and probably, do a few hood rat things. But we are having to process what it feels like to be Black in this body, and a baby, who could have been either of our baby is no longer
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And we ended up rescheduling, we ended up
Mm-hmm.
canceling our time that night because neither one of us really energetically.
Had it.
And I thought about that, and I was like, I started thinking about that. It wasn't even long after that rescheduling that I thought, that's crazy that this country's violence, how it really impacts our love.
Mm.
And so All the Black Girls Are Activists the idea of it originally came, I wanted to write this romance novel about this beautiful love story and about what it looked like for this Black woman to be trying to navigate love in the midst of a global health crisis, in the midst
Mm-hmm.
of, racial uprising, in the midst of, we talk about 2020 global health crisis and racial uprising, and we don't often talk about how violent it was for white people to be pretending that they were on our team, and then they
Oof.
immediately left that team before we even got to the end of 2020. And so it was a lot of stuff happening. Some of us were recognizing it while it was happening. And and I wanted to tell this story, but then the more that I started to outline it, I realized that there was a lot of theory that really needed to be fleshed out in order for these characters to be realistic. Because, as a side note, I am romance novel obsessed, and like, it's what I'm doing with my life in this
Mm-hmm.
season. I
I
am
love it.
listening to and reading romance novels
I
at the
love it.
same time, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
multiple. I have comfort romance novels, the ones that I just go back to and listen to
Oh,
when
wow.
I just need mindlessness. It's a real thing,
Yes.
really
Yes.
in the streets. But also a good majority of them are unrealistic. These are not real characters. I wish that they were. I wish that a very attractive billionaire, Black billionaire with the best sex ever would
Mm-hmm.
come and marry me tomorrow and take me on
Yes.
his jet somewhere. I wish that that was realistic. But for
Yes.
the larger majority of us, that is not what our love story would look like. And so
Right.
the more I started trying to flesh out these characters, particularly the woman, the more I realized, like, oh, I really wanna read a romance novel when or I really wanna write a romance novel that is, like, real. These are
Mm-hmm.
real people, and I feel like there's a lot of stuff that Black women and femmes really need to process and think through before we can even really imagine the kind of love that's on the other side of,
Yeah.
reclaiming ourselves. And so
Yeah.
that's where I'm talking about softness, I'm talking about madness, all of that
Mm-hmm.
is really what this character needed to process before she become realistic. So I'm like, "Okay, well, let me write this theory. Here's the
I
theory.
love
Let me
it.
flesh this out first before I write a romance novel." And the gag is I'm never writing that romance novel.
But I don't.
It's not gonna happen.
I would love it.
I'm
I
not
think
I'm really not a fiction girly. It would just basically be me, the story of me and Jean-Claude, and y'all don't need to know that story. Y'all can.
but we don't need to know, but it might be nice for us to know. You know what I mean?
Okay,
Like
well, we were
for
in
us
love.
to
It was
escape a little
cute.
bit.
I said we was in love. It was cute, you know.
Okay. The
That's
end.
what
Okay.
it is. I'm not a fiction girly. I'm really not. For real. I said that a little bit, you know. I'm just the kind of poet I am, so literal. Like if I say the
Hmm.
sky's blue, it's really blue. That's what my
Hmm.
book would be. And then he came over and girl, write some theory and be quiet.
And we would be like, yes, he came over. And then what? Tell me more. But yeah, I get that. And you know the line that you mentioned about just like how our existence with these real things happening,
Mhm.
like it is a lot to process. I'll tell you something that happened this morning. And so my best friend is like, girl, why are you so like, she's like, you think you a thug? Like, cause I don't, it's cause I'm emotionally stunted. So I'm learning to come into my emotions. So long story short, today is like the end of spirit week for the boys. So I roll up to their school and they're in elementary school and they have the neighboring high school is like cheering them on. So like they have the cheerleaders and the football players who are opening the door and letting them out. And the one boy who came to let the kids out, like dapped them up, and it was just so cute. Like my little one is in kindergarten, so
Uh-huh.
like he was like excited to see like in his mind a professional football player, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So he like dapped them up, was really happy, and I was all right, bye boys, and I locked eyes with the young man. I was just like, have a good one. He's like, you too, have a good one, miss. And he just had the biggest smile, like full of braces, and just a handsome, beautiful boy, just so
Uh-huh.
happy. And I drove off, and I got choked up. And it was because he was smiling and just seeing all these happy, joyful Black boys, like
Mhm.
especially just did something for me and I think it always does. And I literally started to like pray a little bit and cry. And my
Mhm.
prayer was for like, I hope he has all the things that he needs
Uh-huh.
and wants. And the crying was because like, we don't see it enough. And just thinking about all the things that we typically see on the news that's happening to our kids and then the adults too, it was just, I had to call my friend and process. She's just like, welcome to the soft side. She's just like, that's okay. Like, don't talk yourself out of your feelings. Like, it's completely normal. And going back to what you just said, like all the things that we're constantly navigating as
Mhm.
Black folk in America is,
Yeah, if we just had the space to feel the things, you know,
mhm,
to just I just want the space to just be in love, you know. There's a
mhm.
season probably right after probably like 2021 when people ask me, you know, what are you dreaming about or what's next or da 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 whatever, I would just be like, I'm just a free woman on a love journey. Like that's it. And
Oh,
I'm not even just talking about romantic love. I'm talking about like I just want to smile at the baby, you know, open
yeah.
up the door. I just want to I want that to be a thing that I can really focus on. And oh, this is such a perfect opportunity for me to talk about my frustration with how much we talk about this idea of softness, rest, ease as privilege. That
Mhm.
grinds my gears. It is not
Yes.
a privilege
Yep.
for me. It is not a privilege. I really I feel like we will protest ourselves out
Mm.
of freedom, honestly,
Mm.
truly. Because if you think that rest is a privilege, that means that you've othered yourself from it. You don't think that it's something that you should have access to.
Mm.
You don't think that it's something that you're worthy of. And so what you
Mm.
have to realize is that it is intentional that you have not been able to access softness, access your feelings, access your emotions, access your rest, access your ease. It is intentional for that. So at which point you choose, you decide, you say, I'm going to find me some rest. I'm going to find me some ease. I'm going to find me some pleasure by any means
Mhm.
necessary, right? There
Mhm.
is a responsibility that I want us to take for not allowing people to tell us that we don't deserve or have access to things that
Yep.
is just your God-given right. By very nature of being born, you deserve to have food, water,
Yes.
shelter, rest, right?
Yes.
And if you don't have those things or haven't had access to those things, it's not because you don't deserve it. It's not because you're not worthy of it. And it's not because it is some privilege that other people are more worthy of than you. It is
Yep.
because, well, of course, there's systems in place to keep those things out of
That.
reality. And also, it is our responsibility to consistently wake up every single day and say, I am choosing to look for this. I'm
Mhm.
choosing to pursue this. I'm not going to let these institutions or systems convince me that I'm not worthy of it or that I don't deserve it or that I will have to wait until my grandchildren's lifetime for it to be
Mm.
reality. No, in my lifetime, this is a very worthy body. And so I want to access it. I want to see it. I want to pursue it. In conclusion to this sermon, and that's how we arrived here in this place because our ancestors absolutely on a regular basis was like, no, now,
Right.
now
Right.
is the time. We
Right.
want it. We're going to pursue it. We're going to wake up. We're going to boycott. We're going to do all the things that we got to do because we are worthy of it. And certainly our children are worthy of it.
Yes. And oh, you said so many things there. So when the soft life era movement started online or whatever, I was like, yes. And then I saw it quickly spiraled into really
Uh-huh.
materialisticness. Like, well, I'm living the soft life if I have the Chanel bag or if I have a bigger
Uh-huh.
house or if I go on the
Uh-huh.
luxury vacations, that's the soft life. And I'm like, no, we've lost the plot, y'all.
Mhm.
That is, those things are nice. That's great. But that is not the definition of softness. What you just said, all things that you just broke down and illustrated is softness. And I think because our culture is so like capitalism is just
Mhm.
embedded, like the programming is strong. We
Of
think
course.
that to go get things, the things is going to what is going to make our life soft. But
Mhm.
then we have to think about how do we get those things? Like we are
You
going to
gotta grind your
constantly.
body to the yeah, mhm,
Right.
mhm. Well,
Right.
little history lesson actually
Mhm.
about soft
Mhm.
life. I don't think I break this down in the book,
Mhm.
but I talk about the fact that I'm not talking about the same thing as the soft girl era, conversation.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but that idea of Black girl luxury really actually came from Nigerian Twitter. There is a
Mm.
Nigerian woman who tweeted I did my research because I
Yes.
was like, "Nobody's talking about softness the way that I'm talking about it, so let me see where this kind of originated from." So, basically what happened was this, woman who lives in Lagos,
Mhm.
tweeted from this, like, really elaborate apartment
Mhm.
and was just basically like, "I don't got time for XYZ. I'm living the soft life." And it went viral. That kind of idea went viral on Nigerian Twitter for a couple reasons. Number 1, because a lot of people were like, "I want that too,"
Right.
and
Right.
also because a lot of Nigerians were like, girl poverty is rampant in our
Mhm.
and, this is not realistic or attainable for the majority of the people that is, probably your target audience. I actually don't have no beef with what she was talking about. She's basically saying like, I just want to live well.
Right.
And
Right.
this is what well looks like for me. And
Mhm.
what I do think there should be a distinction made around, how capitalism, how owning things, having things, buying things, things like that certainly, is privilege, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
There, it is a privilege to have a high-rise apartment in Lagos, Nigeria,
Mhm.
that is a
Mhm.
privilege. All those
For
words to
sure.
say, at which point totally separate from that, I was having this conversation about softness just in my own personal journey.
Mhm.
And I realized the language that I originally came to is I want a chance to be soft because very much like you, I was raised
Mhm.
to be thugged out, slightly bugged out, right? You know what I'm saying? Like for sure, that's how I was raised. I was like, it's what Dr. Shanique Walker Barnes talks about the difference between a Black woman who happens to be strong and a strong Black woman, one word. And we
Mhm.
really, in our community, have put so much emphasis on being strong Black women, no word,
Yep.
one word, and not the reality that I'm just a Black woman who happens to be strong. But I'm not just strong, I am all of these other things. And
Yep.
so I was like, I want a chance to be soft. I don't want to just be strong. I don't want to be a thug. I don't want to be
Mhm.
missing out on like the ease and the sweetness that's available to me when I get to relax into my body, which is
Mhm.
then how I started to flesh out the definition that I provided for softness, that it is a regulating nervous system. It is what it feels like when you're completely seated in your body, right? That there is
Mhm.
something um there's something other than this kind of tension, tight resistance, energy that we could live into and lean into, but we just historically haven't had access to it. And I want us to consider that accessing it, because we are worthy of it and we deserve it, and it's not,
Hmm.
separate from us. Accessing it is a powerful tool for us to do the nervous system regulating and, soft
Yes.
work and to be seated. So,
Yeah. And I think I didn't approach All the Black Girls Are Activists as like a wellness book, but
okay.
I think for me, this is very much, it gives you a framework or food for thought on
Mhm,
things that I need to work through in my life to achieve that softness and to be like whole and
mhm,
well. I think when we, just to go back 1 second, so when we talk about like, the soft life and things, to
uh-huh,
know what makes me feel good and well, like it takes some
mhm.
work to know
Oh,
yourself,
yeah, mhm.
you know? And I think because again, our culture is very much like what on the outside is going to bring me peace.
Uh-huh.
A lot of us don't know. You know what I mean? So let me just keep
Period.
chasing these things and then
That's
hopefully I'll
good.
feel whole and good, and it never happens. So you got to
Mhm,
sit with yourself. And for me, this book is so special to me because it gave me like a lot of food for thought and framework as to who am I for real, for
mhm,
real? Like
mhm.
outside of what they told me I should be, whether it's like society, my family, like who am I, you know?
I think there definitely is a huge wellness. I think that if you found that book in the wellness section at the library or, in the bookstore, it wouldn't be completely off because my intention is to talk about healing through, about evolving, about growing, about, what it takes to have the kinds of revelations that I had to get to the, ideas that I came to in each of these essays.
I kind of want to touch on before we wrap up, I kind of want to touch on spirituality. One of the
Mhm.
things that really resonated with me in reading the book was your I think our upbringings were similar. Very Christian household. You're from the South, my people from the Caribbean. So there are threads there that are very
Wow.
aligned, right? And as I grew up and as I've been growing to know myself, I've always questioned some of the theology and the messaging that I've received in
Mhm.
the church. And I started to like explore what all else is out there. And you have in one passage you mentioned like you came out in a way in quotes
Yeah, of my
to your grandmother about being non-Christian.
mhm, mhm,
Um, and I think a lot of us are on that path, right? So with that being said, a lot of us are now going um, trying to understand how to venerate our ancestors and
mhm,
include our ancestors in our everyday. So, for those of us who are in the beginning stages of our journey, what would be some advice or insight as to even how to go there?
mhm. Yeah, okay. So I I wanna tell this story very quickly. My great-grandmother, Minnie Bell Lee, was a sharecropper, one generation out of slavery. She's a
Hmm.
sharecropper, her and her husband, Edward. And they are the parents of my grandmother, Emma Jane Baxley, who I talk about in the book.
Hmm.
And, by some arbitrary defining of intelligence, my grandmother, who isn't the oldest sibling or the youngest sibling, is the only sibling who never picked cotton.
Hmm.
Everybody else, all of her other siblings picked cotton to help with their family, as sharecroppers, right, to live where they lived.
Hmm.
And, but my grandparents said of my grandmother, "Emma Jane cannot pick cotton, she must go to school."
Hmm.
So, my grandmother, as a result, is the only one of her siblings to have an education. She went to school. And then by my mother's generation, all of my grandmother's 6 girls went to school, graduated from high school, and it
Yeah.
it was just a given. So
Yeah.
by my generation, it was not, toss confetti in the sky about it. I mean, of course we celebrate, but it's not like, of course you're going to go to school.
It was like the norm at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just the
Hmm.
norm. So
Hmm.
in my great-grandmother and grandfather's lineage and their family tree, they have all these children, and
Hmm.
then when you get to my grandmother's edge of or a branch of the family tree, this branch is the only branch of the family tree that has education at its core
Hmm.
down to now my great-grandmother would have great-great-great-grandchildren, great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren now because
Wow.
of the grandchildren and their children at this point. Yeah, dang.
Wow.
I got some cousins that got some babies, and I'm like, I helped raise you. How do you have a baby?
Wow.
So,
Time.
anyways, that to say, the audacity of me to ever think that I can say anything intelligent, anything that is wise, anything that, transforms us or helps us or supports us without mentioning Cassandra, Emma, Minnie Bell Lee. Because at which point Minnie Bell Lee looked at Emma Jane Baxley and said, Emma can't pick cotton. She has to go to school. As someone who is a dreamer, this the
Mhm.
subtitle of the book, of course, is Dreams is Radical Resistance. I fully believed that my ancestors, I am not the wildest dream that my ancestors have ever had, but I am certainly a wild dream of my ancestors.
Mm.
That there is something spiritual and supernatural happening in the moment where Minnie Bell Lee says Emma has to go to school. And here's the new revelation for me. I used to say because she looked into the future and saw me, and
Mhm.
said, Emma Jane has to go to school so that EbonyJanice can da 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 whatever. I've decided to get over that arrogance because as a dreamer, Minnie Bell Lee looked into the future and saw my lineage, maybe
Mm.
my great great grandbaby, who will certainly do something much more profound than whatever I'm sitting here talking about, right?
Stop.
And I'm saying that I'm not trying to minimize that this isn't good for us, but this is good for us in this moment. My
Okay.
great great grandchildren or great great nieces and nephews, right? They will be standing on our shoulders with much
Yeah.
more information, insight, and the ability to realize us even further into the future. And so Minnie Bell Lee, at which point she said Emma Jane can't pick cotton, she has to go to school. She is saying to the future, this is what we're coming to do. We're coming to transform this. And so
Mm.
it does feel very arrogant to ever think that I could say anything or do anything and not involve my elders and ancestors in the conversation because
Mm.
I'm literally here in this
Mm.
moment because Emma Jane couldn't pick cotton. She had to go to school. We would not be having this conversation otherwise. This is what happens to us, though, particularly as Black people across the diaspora, as a result of colonialism, imperialism, as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. The idea that we would talk about our ancestors has been watered down, washed
Yeah.
out, demonized to
Yeah.
the point that you believe talking about your ancestors is demonic.
Demonic. Right.
It's
Yep.
demonic.
Yep.
Here's the gag. And I imagine that this is one of the moments for you in that particular chapter that was like, wait a minute. For me, as a Black American in the United States of America as a result of chattel slavery, we
Mhm.
have never had a serious conversation in the United States of America about reparations.
Mhm.
Every other group of people who've experienced any form of
Yep.
genocide have have received reparations.
Mhm.
So here's the way that they receive their reparations. They either were still alive and had the evidence that they were a part of that genocide, and or their descendants had direct access to say, this was my grandmother, my grandfather, da da da, whatever. So they had a
Yeah.
record of it. They
Yep.
still knew the names of the ones that came before them. They built a wall and a monument.
Mhm.
Black people across the globe, as a result of chattel slavery, all the records are somehow lost,
Of
misplaced,
course.
don't exist.
Yep.
And or it wasn't your real name anyways, da 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 whatever. So for the large majority of us that are not born and raised on the continent of Africa, and even those who are experiencing still to this day the violence of colonialism and imperialism,
Mhm.
do not have the ability to say, "Oh, I can actually prove that my grandmother is the child of slave croppers. Her mother is the child of an enslaved woman. On my father's side, I can actually prove that my great grandmother is the child of a grape, and as
Right.
a result of that
Right.
sexual assault, da 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 da
Right.
da. I could prove that."
Yep.
But the reason why we don't have those kinds of conversations or really have access to those records is because we are the only group of people who actually has invested in, participated in demonizing our ancestry. Asian people,
Mm.
they know their ancestors. They know they could trace their ancestry back to like dynasties. European people, they be like, I'm the cousin of the great queen of such and such.
Yeah.
Jewish people, they know
Yeah.
their ancestors. Here we are, though, as Black people across the globe, afraid to talk about ancestor veneration because it's demonic to talk about your ancestors. And ancestor
Mm.
veneration is not a worship ceremony. It is saying, I will literally never stop saying Emma Jane Baxley's name, ever. I will
Mm.
never take her name out of my mouth,
Let's
ever.
go.
Never, ever, ever.
Let's go.
So there's both this is the legal ramifications of not understanding how powerful and profound ancestor veneration is.
Golly. Something about what you said made me think about. So this past July, I took a bucket list trip to Tanzania.
Okay.
And when we were in Tanzania, we visited one of I think that's one of the last remaining slave castles
Mhm.
in Zanzibar.
Okay.
And being in that dungeon for like 10 seconds was just like you could feel the heaviness of spirit.
Uh-huh.
Like I can't explain it. But when I left there, I had like all these thoughts because A, it was at the bottom of a church. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's completely normal. Apparently, that's common practice.
Across the continent. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And then I was thinking, like, I realized that part of me, and
You
I'm
know
like
why
kind
it
of
was at the
ashamed to
bottom of the
say,
church?
hmm?
They told you why it was at the bottom of the church, most of these slave castles?
No, no, why?
Because for most of the dungeons, or there's a part where they would keep the enslaved people, they would put a hole in the ceiling, right? And so the actual sanctuary would be right above where the enslaved people were, so that they could preach down into the hole. So the beginning of their enculturation into a gospel that said they should be slaves was on the continent before they ever left, right? In those shackles, in that space, underneath a church, because they need to receive this preachment before we even get on the ship.
Mm.
Mhm.
It's just so wild. It's so wild
Wild.
because that dungeon was so small and
Mhm.
cramped and hot. I went to the female section and it was just for women and children. It was so tiny. They said they had like 100 people in there. It was 10 of us in there and we kind of could touch. So
Mhm.
I can't imagine being in there, hearing sermons come to you. What?
Mhm.
And then what I thought about was how even though we are across the globe, right? There is something that unites us and that we have in common as Black folk, whether it's the way we cook our food or some of
Mhm.
our traditions, like it surpasses where we are.
Mhm.
On that same trip, I went to a village and one of the village mothers cooked us a meal. And I almost cried because it tastes like the bean soup that my mother makes.
Uh-huh.
Exactly the same. You can taste the coconut in it and the
Uh,
spices. And I'm just like, we kept these traditions regardless. And it made me so proud. So bringing back, I felt so proud that not only somebody survived that
mhm.
horrificness, but not only did they survive it, but they were able to not instill, but preserve tradition and then pass it on to their children. So
Mhm.
all that to say yes to everything that you just said. The people who came before us were thinking of us.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And for me, what really resonated, especially that part, that chapter about ancestry, is because I've always felt like as a kid, I have a very small family and my mother comes from a larger family, but she just, at an arm's length. So I
Mhm.
always felt like I was like alone, right? And one of my good girlfriends, she got a reading from a medium who could speak to the other side. And long story short, they connected her with her mother. And I was like, I want a reading, mom. This I don't think a person will come through. And I was
Mm.
having that thought, and then I
Mhm.
listened to this part of the book, and I was just like, "Ooh, let me sit with this." Somebody was thinking about me. Somebody does know me and love me
Mhm.
over there. You know what I
'Cause you
mean?
have this truth system because you're from such a small family, close-knit family, that you ain't got no ancestors thinking about you. I'm not laughing because that's funny, I'm laughing
It don't
because
make no sense.
because the mi no, I'm laughing because how good, you know, colonization really did
Ooh,
the job, whatever they meant to do,
ooh,
they did it, baby. They really
ooh.
did it, that because there certainly is a let's not forget that I am the child, the granddaughter of ministers, you know what I'm saying? I've been
Mhm,
preaching from a pulpit since I was 8 years old, so this is not something that has been a lifetime of my knowing and
mhm.
or even my belief system, right? There is a version of me that absolutely would have
Mhm.
demonized this version of me like, "Ooh, you know,
Right.
she a
She done
witch."
gone astray. Okay. Backslide.
Honestly, and not just backslide, ain't no return for her. She just
Okay.
gonna burn, girl. I know that
Oh,
I would.
roast.
I know that I woulda. And so that just feels important to note because when I say that, um, that I understand that kind of ideology, that kind of mentality because I have had it at some point. But I also want to acknowledge that there also always was a small portion of me that felt, like, is this is this right?
Mhm,
As a growing up in a southern I grew up in a predominantly white town,
mhm,
small town, but I grew up in a Southern Black Christian church.
mhm,
And so my church experience and my family experience was not macrocosmic of what was happening in my town,
mhm,
which which is to say that I had white friends who also went to church, Catholic church, Methodist church, etc. And they were having a drastically different experience with God than I was in
mhm.
this Southern Black Christian experience.
Yep.
And so that just feels important to note because then as a young girl, I'm seeing, you know, Heidi Roth and, Susan Smith and Carrie Dahlman and their relationship with God don't look like my relationship with God. What's different between the four of us? I'm
Mhm,
Black. They are not, right? And
mhm,
so I'm crystal clear about my Blackness in this very white space, but with this very Black,
mhm.
familial Christian experience that's like, I'm Black. That's why this is different. That's why this is different. That's why this is different. It is my Blackness that is the thing that makes it unique. And
Yeah.
so I'm very early in the game fleshing out any kind of um anti-Blackness that exists for me, right? I'm processing my thighs, my little track star thighs as a little girl
Mhm,
that I can't, that's different from my friend's thighs. I'm seeing my body is different. I'm seeing these different things. I'm seeing the way that I'm being treated sometimes in,
mhm,
in school or in public places that's different from my white friends, which is the larger demographic of people that I grew up with.
mhm,
And and so I 1000 trillion% can say that while I certainly demonized, Blackness at some point as well,
mhm, mhm.
I also always had this like, is this right?
Right.
We
Yeah.
over here having a different experience that I always preferred. I always preferred my God experience to my white friend's God experience. Always. So is this actually worse? I feel
Mhm.
like we're preaching kind of this anti-Blackness, but being Black is really lit. Is this
Right.
really wrong? Like, why
Right.
why would God, like, as good as God is all the time, why are they so quiet? I feel like we might know something about God that they don't know. And
Mm.
and that too is lit. And so
Mhm.
there's kind of it made sense that I ended up getting a degree in cultural anthropology because the cultural anthropologist in me was kind of always there like something something ain't right. So
Yeah. Oof.
may the Lord add a blessing to the readers, hearers, and doers of his word. That's very churchy.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been just so good for me. I feel like this podcast at this point is just for me because I am just the most blessed and I've grown because
Thank
of people like you. Thank you so much for all that
you.
you have done. Is there anything that you would wish that I had asked and you want to talk about? Or is there anything that you'd just like a closing something?
My closing would just really be that it is your divine right just by being born. There's not anything that you need to do. There's no permission that you need to receive to actually pursue your wellness, your softness, your ease, your rest. It is your divine right. And resist anybody telling you that there's something extra that some extra hoop you gotta jump through to access ease, to access softness. It is your work. It is your work. It is your
Yeah.
responsibility. In fact, I would say that's the point of this life. Becoming actual
Mhm.
you is the point of this
Ooh.
life. That is the point. So don't let anybody distract you or dissuade you from pursuing what you just deserve just because you were born.
Amen and amen. Yes.
Amen and
Yes,
thank
yes,
God.
yes. Where can the people find you? Buy the book, all of those good things.
I am at EbonyJanice everywhere, and everywhere you can find EbonyJanice is where EbonyJanice will be at. And the book is wherever books are sold. And funnily, you can go to ebonyjanice.com and even find the book.
Bam. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Be Well Sis. If you'd like to get in touch with us, there's a link in the show notes. Be Well Sis is hosted by me, Dr. Cassandra Dunbar, and produced by Edit Audio. Don't forget to hit follow so you never miss an episode. Until next time, be well, sis.